Well, it is the end of an era. Three beloved giant pandas at the Smithsonian's National Zoo are headed back to China. They boarded the FedEx Panda Express this morning. The original pandas were gifts to the U.S. from China in 1972 as part of a 50-year conservation program that began under President Richard Nixon. For generations, the National Zoo welcomed pandas from China to help preserve the species once considered endangered. And that program was a huge success because pandas are no longer on the endangered species list.
So please know that the future is bright for giant pandas. We remain committed to our program, and we look forward to celebrating with all of you when pandas can return to D.C.
Now, the giant pandas were originally expected to return to China in early December, but China pulled the pandas earlier as diplomatic tensions rise between the U.S. and Beijing. Tia Ewing is in Studio 32 with that part of the story. Tia?
Well, Natalie, we know this isn't as simple as black and white. China is also ending its panda program with other Western countries, including the U.K. North Central College political science professor Stephen Caliendo joins me now to dig deeper into this brewing political battle. As always, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, T, and thank you for recognizing my tremendous versatility to be able to come on and talk about wildlife.
I know, yeah, well, it's a political part of it all, right? So let's get into this. Where did the history begin between the U.S. and China over pandas?
Yeah, I mean, China has had this program dating back, I think, to early in the 20th century, but certainly I think we mostly mark it during the Cold War, not just with the United States, but with other Western nations as well. And as Natalie mentioned, there was that very famous program that started in the 1970s, 1971, I believe, with Richard Nixon, and coming to the National Zoo. But there's also been pandas that have been at other zoos. There's still, I think, one or two pandas at the Atlanta Zoo that will be going home soon. So this has been a long program, and it is tied to diplomacy. It certainly has been a long time coming.
Keyword there, diplomacy. So obviously zoos, we know now, that host pandas outside of China usually agree to send cubs back before they turn 4 years old and to send adults back before they are elderly. Now, politically speaking, looking at all of this, why is this return so different?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that changed about China's approach to this came in the 1980s, where they used to gift pandas. So those pandas that we received, the United States received in the 70s, were a gift. And then in the 1980s, I believe, they started to take a little bit of a different approach where they were on loan. And then we actually, you know, the zoos pay money back to China for conservation efforts. And as Natalie pointed out, the pandas are no longer on the endangered list. So these leases were about to expire anyway. It wasn't just sort of a knee-jerk reaction, but they did end a few weeks earlier than originally planned. I think the issue is, why were they not renewed? Because in the past, as you suggested, Tia, when they're of a certain age and they're healthy, the leases are simply renewed, and that's not the case, not only in the U.S. but in other Western nations as well.
You know, obviously here in the U.S., China has dominated, in some cases, our headlines. The Chinese spy balloon, for example. We know President Biden and the president of China are expected to meet at the end of this month. Obviously, we expect pandas to be on that agenda. What else do you think they will potentially talk about?
Pandas will be on the agenda. I mean, it seems like a small thing, but it's really an important, not only a diplomatic gesture, but it's something important to a lot of citizens in the United States to be able to see pandas, because they're not native to this area, of course, to North America. So you can expect certainly lots of talks about economics and fair trade. It certainly talks about human rights. And in this global climate that's very heated, there will certainly be talks about international relations, both with respect to the Russia question and the Ukraine, and, of course, what's happening in the Middle East. So it's very important talks upcoming between the two nations' leaders.
And I'm sure we'll be talking to you again when we have that meeting of both of those presidents. As always, Professor Caliendo, it's a pleasure to have you here breaking it all down on First at 4. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tia.
All right, Anthony and Natalie, I'll send it back to